Welcome back to the Georgia Professional Learning Community. And this webinar 5C is all about preparing for the spring. Typically in the spring, this is when it's time for large group performance evaluation. Your students have probably had a fall and a winter concert, and you're trying to figure out what to do for the spring. So we're going to talk about those wonderful things. First thing they have to do in the fall in Georgia, of course, is register your students for large group performance evaluation. I recommend this. If you are not a member of the Georgia Music Educators Association, I recommend that you pay those dues and become a member. It allows your students to basically participate in so many wonderful activities, such as large group performance evaluation. So when you register your choirs, make sure that you know their ability. Are they able to sing in certain parts? And pick music accordingly. You don't want to pick music that's too difficult for your students. So let's look at those possibilities for students. Your middle school students can go anywhere from class M all the way to from class D, MC, MB, and MA. Now, of course, as we progress down, that level is advanced. So MD is kind of like the parameters of what a junior high school course would be said. Of course, you always want to read that Georgia Music Educators Association handbook so that you can understand what all of this means. But this is just a snapshot of what you'll see in the handbook. The classes that high school choirs can go is class A, B, C, or D. Now, of course, class A is the highest level that you can take students. The sight reading is the most difficult as well, and the voicing is sometimes the most difficult. The VIZI and SSAATTBEBB type music, but you always make the decision based on your students' abilities, and you pretty much have it all set. Now, the voicings, of course, as any choir director should know, that your students could go unison, and music can be of a difficult level at unison. Keep that in mind. You may have some students that are breaking off in parts, maybe your more advanced 6th grade group, or maybe even your 7th grade group. 2-part, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, those voicings, soprano, alto, baritone. 3-part mixed, SATB, and SSA. Again, you just want to be creative and know your students' ability. So keep all of this in mind when you register those students in the fall. Then you want to, of course, establish goals in your literature. We talked about this on the previous webinar. You want to look at the musical concepts that you want to point out, the vocabulary, some of the vocabulary that the students may not be aware of, some musical elements. And of course, because you want to develop musicians, you want to avoid a lot of rote teaching. You want to develop students that can read music, that can perform music, that can understand those musical elements and terms. So rote is the last resort for middle school and high school level core students. Again, 6th graders, they're still learning. Even some of your 7th graders, but by 8th grade, you want to get them prepared for the next level. And that typically means that rote teaching days can kind of be over, unless it's something that you just want to teach them really quickly, like a warm-up. So those goals that you establish should include form, dynamics, texture, style, maybe some concepts in the music such as the breathing techniques, rhythm, chordal progressions, musical terms such as tempo. Maybe there's a 30-second note. Maybe there's an RIT period that you want your students to understand in the literature. Time signatures, key signatures. There are so many musical terms, and of course you're going to find them on the Georgia Department of Education website. Look at those terms, look at those standards, and set parameters for your students so you'll know exactly what to teach. And then you start teaching those standards through the literature. It might be a rhythm that you want to magnify at the beginning of class that comes directly from the literature. And when you decide to read through it, you can tell them, hey, that's exactly what we just did at the beginning of class, and it'll actually make sense to them. Teach them according to what you want them to learn. Key signatures. It might be 4 sharps in the key signature of the new music, and you're used to singing only in F. So go over key signatures. Go over those particular methods, because you're developing musicians who will understand what they see on a page, not students who will understand, hey, I heard this and I can sing it back. You might want to go over pitch. There's so many, the possibilities are endless with music. And that's a lot of times why I used to get frustrated as a beginning teacher, because I didn't know exactly what, what particular order I wanted to teach my musical elements in. And when you think about it, every year it might be different. It might be according to your music. It might be according to the time frame that you have your students. So always develop some goals for yourself and what you want them to learn. As I told you before, these lessons are amazing on the Georgia Department of Education website. So please take a look at them, download some of these links. It can get quite overwhelming if you try it all at one time. The one thing that I've done, I would literally print every single page and I put it in a notebook and I highlighted those things that I know that will work for my students that year. So take these free lessons, take these free units, take these free vocabularies and make them work for your classroom and your students. And then remember to mold musicians. Your student's instrument is their voice. Do they know how to play it? So you never want to pick literature that your students can't understand for the sake of sounding great all the time. Yes, sometimes we pick music that's too hard. Yes, sometimes as choral educators, we teach our students through rote. We let them work in sectionals. We plunk out their notes on the keyboard. But how can they become musicians? Think about how our band educators teach their students to read their music. We have to make sure that we teach our students to be able to use their instruments accordingly. Some of my daily practices that help this come to life: warm-ups. Don't let your warm-ups just be you at the keyboard and your students singing. Allow your students to warm up singing chords. Allow your students to warm up using a sight reading example. Just remember to do it every day. Don't forget to do this. Another thing, sight reading. It's a non-negotiable in my classroom. Warm-ups, sight reading are going to happen every single day. And I see my students every other day at the middle school level here at my district. So I try to get in as much as I can through that 1 or 2, maybe 3 days that I'm going to see them in the week. So make it a thing to where they're going to read music, either it be through some of their literature or a sight reading example that you've pulled from the internet. Daily practices also include rhythm. Train your students how to read rhythms, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes. If you can make it at the middle school or high school level to 30-second notes, go for it. Drills, drills, drills. There's free stuff on so many platforms. You can print worksheets, you get methods books, but try your best to mold these musicians and make it a thing to do it every day. And of course, always establish some classroom rules. Make choices so others can learn. Use good manners. Allow your students to sing and play when directed by a teacher. Encourage them to involve themselves in those activities, and of course, care for others and the musical equipment. So establish those goals for your students. And let's not forget to recruit for new students in the spring. Yes, and December, after our winter concerts are usually over, I usually do recruiting again for January. And I try to put those students in my lower level or my beginning level courses or classes so that we can get those students recruited in course for the next year. Your feeder schools. This is a great time in the spring to figure out what you're going to do with your feeder schools. If you're in middle school, have you reached out to your elementary teachers? I know I haven't. I'm a little behind myself. If you're a middle school teacher, has your high school teacher reached out to you? Or if you're a high school teacher, have you reached out to your middle school director? Have you planned some concerts together? Maybe you're going to do a showcase for your large group performance evaluation. Maybe you have a lot of teachers in your district and you can get together and do a county-wide showcase or a district-wide showcase. And of course, students love to be in charge. So if you have some credible students that are great at maybe taking on the responsibility of helping others, use them. Use your section leaders to go out and recruit students. They talk to students a whole lot better than you do, I promise you. And then I found this. You have to find students. It looks like it came off of a church website, but I wanted to read it to you. It says, "Psst, If the person sitting next to you has a nice voice on the hymns, write his or her name on this card and drop it in the offering plate. This will help us build our choir. Your choir always needs building. I don't care if it's a 100-piece choir or a 10-piece choir. It's always great to have more voices, more students who are willing to learn, willing to sing in your choir. So never, ever, ever forget to find them. I find my students in the cafeteria, when I'm on lunch duty, on my morning duty post. So take a moment to learn some new names in your school and continue to recruit. I again will post these wonderful resources and credits where I've gotten all this information, and I want to thank you for participating or watching these webinars. Stay tuned for webinar 6, where I'm going to include some beautiful choral educators on their best practices teaching different things. So thanks again. If you need anything from me, I'm right on the Georgia community platform, and I'm on Instagram at Miss B Dent. So thanks again and happy teaching.